Talk about 2016 and terrorism with CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp and Democratic strategist Stephanie Cutter. Thanks to both of you for being here. S.E., let me start with you. After the Paris attacks, there was this feeling among the Republican establishment, those who support Bush and Rubio and Cruz, okay, now the voters are going to get serious. But it didn't work out that way. And if you look at our poll on the issues of ISIS, immigration, foreign policy, Donald Trump is considered by a plurality of Republican voters to be the one that can best handle this. This attack in San Bernardino could continue to bolster Trump.
I expect that it will. I think there's a sense, certainly among his supporters and among other Republican voters, that the ISIS strategy out of this administration has been terribly flawed. And I think a lot of people are suspicious that more establishment Republican candidates will sort of carry on an Obama light version or an Obama hawk version and not really shake things up the way Trump talks about shaking things up. No one seems to mind, of course, that what Trump proposes we do is both unconstitutional and against the Geneva Convention.
In terms of killing terrorist families. Killing
ISIS's families, creating a Muslim American database. I mean, a lot of the promises he makes to his supporters, he will never be able to keep. But he is certainly talking the most hawkish talk, and that's obviously appealing.
Stephanie, you know, there is conventional wisdom in the Democratic Party that this all bolsters Hillary Clinton, and certainly I can see that argument within the Democratic primary fold. But is it not a risk to her that she, as the former Secretary of State, will be blamed, along with President Obama, for the rise of ISIS? Could this not be horrible news for her in the general, even if it's good for her hawkish credentials in the primary?
Well, I think that knowing what the Republican race is at this point, Hillary's going to stand out amongst that field in terms of not only having the knowledge to talk about her national security credentials and her national security vision, but in terms of being trusted, in terms of leadership and being a strong leader and strong on national security, she already has that support, not just amongst Democrats, but amongst independents.
Well, let's take a look, because Stephanie, we have some new numbers from our poll that are breaking this hour. Hillary Clinton is statistically tied when matched up against top Republican contenders. You see there, she's basically within the margin of error of Carson, Rubio, Bush, Trump, and Cruz. Among independents, however, she loses across the board. There you see she's getting walloped with independents. So I don't know how that fits in with the argument you were just making, or maybe you consider this poll to be an outlier. I don't know. But like, well, independents don't seem to be buying what she's selling.
Well, first of all, I do think that that poll is an outlier. And when we get to a general election and there are two people at the top of the ticket, the choice is going to be that much more clear. And when you have a Hillary Clinton versus a Carson or a Donald Trump, I think that choice is going to be pretty clear to people in terms of even understanding how to address our enemies. I mean, S.E. was talking about Donald Trump's policies, whether it's a national database of Muslims, killing terrorist families, shutting down mosques, deporting 11 million Americans. Those are the types of things that are going to hurt Republicans in a general election. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hearing all this talk.
That's certainly what many people in the Republican establishment think, and in fact, you've seen that in the last week or so, as the Republicans worried that Donald Trump might hurt them in terms of Kelly Ayotte, the senator in New Hampshire running for re-election, Rob Portman running for re-election in Ohio, that he could be a drag because independents might ultimately vote for Hillary, that poll aside.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me when you look at maybe a Real Clear Politics average or these CNN polls that she is statistically tied with everyone at the top of our ticket, and that includes Carson, that includes Donald Trump. So yes, it's hard to envision a hypothetical 6 months down the road, but Republicans are still, or voters are still deciding that the Republican frontrunners are a pretty good matchup against Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine what Trump can do between now and then to really lose the confidence of the voters, the support he's already gotten.
Nothing seems to have worked yet. S.E. Cupp, Stephanie Cutter. Thanks so much. The final